Savagery Part 4. Baba would pretend to slap him and Abaka would laughingly duck, and then Baba would point sternly at the book and say, "Read." So Abaka would stop reading again. Slowly Baba lost the sad look on his face. He became an altogether more pleasant person, better tempered and better able to interact with the rest of the village, and he busied himself looking after this small boy who had so strangely come into his life. He told himself that he understood Abaka's reluctance to believe what he told him. It was hard to accept the fact that the world had been so different such a very short time ago, and life so much easier. How was he, Baba, going to convince him? Why should he try? And the answer came to him. He could convince him by bringing the world back to the place it had once been. And he had to try, because if it didn't, the world would die. Baba was quite overwhelmed by this thought. He sat down heavily on the doorstep of an ancient house and looked at the village, camped slightly lower down. How was he going to save the world? One human being against the elements, against the lack of human knowledge, against the terrible march of time, had laid his world to ruin. In those days, there had been so many people, so many who could have saved the planet if only they had acted in time. There would have been water left over for new generations if they had conserved it. The rivers would still have run if they hadn't made so many dams that the water cycle had stopped. There would still have been crops if the changing seasonal patterns hadn't made it possible for them to grow. There would still have been so many people if global warming and the extreme heat it had brought hadn't killed them all. He laughed a little to himself. Global warming, he hadn't heard that in a long time. He was surprised he had survived it when his friends and colleagues hadn't, when his family hadn't, when his son hadn't. Baba shook himself. No, thinking about his son wouldn't do. This was not the time to look back. This was the time to look forward and try to bring the earth back to life. Because if he did, Abaka would have a miserable life and die early. So began Baba's new life. Instead of teaching just a boy, he went to all the parents in the village and asked them to send their children to his school. Some parents laughed, others him off, but most just shrugged and said he could take them if he could make them go. By the time the school began, Baba convinced 36 children of all ages, heights, positions, and levels of personal hygiene to come. Baba himself began to look better. Baths were all in existence in that terrible time, but he made an effort to clean his face and comb his hair, and some of his students followed suit. Though most didn't, Baba didn't mind so long as the ladies went. They didn't mind how dirty they were. The days were spent in teaching the children and the afternoons in talking to adults. At least those who listened. In the beginning, few did. Baba was laughed at, riled, and ridiculed. He didn't mind. He had about 40 people listening to him, and they were enough. A year passed, then two. Baba told the people about his world, the old world in rivers carried water, and how they had gushed in an even earlier world. He spoke of the water that fell from the sky, and how earlier there had been torrents of it that had filled the rivers, how his grandfather had taught wetlands and lovely lakes so big you could drown in them. Then, of course, he had to explain what boats were.